Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
Hey, and this is Jack from salesbread.com. Okay, so today's cast is about your cold email approach for selling low-priced items, very high-priced items, and somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, different price points. Yeah. Our
Because
strategy will vary.
changes. Yeah, very much. I mean, you don't want to be having a high-touch strategy for something that's only going to churn out $9 a month. I mean, it's very rarely going to be worth your time to do a lot of hand-holding at that price point. On the other side of the coin. Yeah.
You're already starting the cast. Hold on a second. We need to talk about our sponsors. We got two sponsors.
That's right.
We got QuickMail.io, amazing cold email outreach software that also does the auto warming of your inbox for free. Check it out, QuickMail.io. And we have salesbread.com. Today, B2B SaaS business owner. Go ahead. It's probably not know it off by heart yet.
You got it. Today, most B2B companies lack the time or expertise to turn, yes, cold prospects into warm leads. At salesbread.com, we help you bring one lead per day or booked appointment using ultra-personalized cold emails and LinkedIn messages. If you want to talk strategy, get some ideas, or just talk about working together, head over to salesbread.com/contact, fill in your info, and we'll be chatting. All right.
Yeah. Booyah. All right.
With the
now this is out of the
way. Let's get to it, because this is interesting. Every company considering outbound lead generation needs to consider their price points to figure out their strategy.
Spot on. Yeah. If I'm selling a $9 a month and you're selling a 10K a month product, we probably will have slightly different strategy on how we approach cold outreach.
Yeah. And one of my favorite bits of, and there's only a couple that match this criteria of what I would call marketing wisdom, but one of my favorite bits of that is you need to know what you can afford to acquire a new customer.
Yeah.
And then go ahead and decide how you're going to spend that towards acquiring them.
Yeah.
Right. Because, yeah.
What would you, I mean, yeah, go ahead. Start on this then.
Because it's not quite like saying, all right, well, how much can we afford for a click? Because cold email, the emails across the board, no matter what industry you're going after, are the same price. It takes kind of the same amount of work to build a list of plumbers as it does to build a list of lawyers. Whereas if this was PPC, a click to get a lawyer's attention or a click to get, say, a stay-at-home mom, those price points are going to be very different. And that's not what we're talking about today. It's more about how much time you are going to bake into these campaigns, and where that magic balance point is.
So what would be on your list? That's the first, big difference or big approach difference.
It's all about your sales time, or the time your team or yourself are inside the sales process. That could be replying to emails. That could be on the phone, doing demos. And that makes a lot of sense at the higher price points. But what if you have a $9 a month product? You got to think differently.
Yeah.
So let's start there. Yeah.
Yeah. What I had for the high price point would be, you probably will start to split into different roles and responsibilities. So you could effectively afford like having an army of 3 people, one that does, SDR only, just reaching out to people, another one that does prospecting, another one that does the closing, maybe even someone else that does the qualifying call. You just make sure this is correct. You probably have like multiple calls in your process. So that would be something that I would probably put in place if I had like a high ticket item that I could potentially put it for the $9, but I'd be losing money pretty quickly, potentially, right?
So what I'm hearing is for a very high price point, and I think we define these, that would be something around 10K a month, right? This group would get a lot of salespeople. I didn't hear you mention any marketer role on this group, right?
No, you're right. It will be
intentionally.
It will be very juicy to have an outbound, an outbound strategy for that type of, price point, I would say.
Yeah. So now that we have our team in place, let's spend a little bit of time talking about the strategy. I guess we're starting from the high end and we'll work our way down.
Okay. So what would you have for the sort of like mid tier, like if it's a product for 200, 500 a month?
Okay. So now we're talking the team for
Oh,
2 to 500.
yeah, potentially. Like for me, I'm like seeing like more or less as a spectrum. It doesn't have to be like a linear kind of progression. It could be that you have like just one person until a certain price point, and then suddenly you need like 5%, or it doesn't have to be like linear in terms of the growth. But I do see a lot of those things that we're going to discuss as kind of like almost polar opposites, right? Like a lot of
Hmm.
people, when you have a higher price point that support your sales efforts, lot less people when you put a lower price point. But the opposite is also true, I would say, which is we should probably try to pre-qualify a lot of people up front before actually going on a call with them when you're on a lower price point. And then you probably will do that less as you are on a higher price point, because everyone is worth so much more in itself. That's a sort of like two
Okay.
sort of like balance, I would see.
Yeah,
Right.
that makes sense. Now, in terms of team, and I've got a lot to say on the approach, the strategy, but in terms of team, you're still going to need someone to build that list.
Yep.
You're still going to need someone to manage those campaigns. That may be
Hmm.
one and the same. You're still going to need someone to handle the responses, whether that's through an email or booking a Zoom meeting and showing up to that Zoom meeting and doing all that follow up. So, in this light, Jeremy, I don't see the roles changing significantly, although you may not need such a closer if it's lower price.
Maybe. I think at
Tell
low
me
low
what you're
price
thinking.
points, I think there is a huge temptation of just buying lists, but we all know this is like tomato garbage, kind of thing. You don't you will need to sort of build it if you do want like good quality, but there will be a huge temptation. And like every day I got someone that say like, how many emails can I send maximum with quick mail? Like, can I send like 10K emails a day? And I was like,
Right.
yeah, go and see my competitors. They probably can afford that. Whatever.
Yeah.
It's just
Okay.
like,
So that's interesting. So it's
yeah,
like as your price points come down, the tendency, not necessarily the
that's right. Not
idea,
the
but
gate
the
approach. Yeah.
tendency
Mhm.
is to cheapen your starting
Cut
point,
corners. Yeah, you
cut
start cutting
corners.
corners. Yeah, whether it's with the list prospecting that you get, or even the time you're going to be willing to just give like a 5 minutes phone call versus like maybe a 2 hour strategy session
Yeah.
for the 10K. Like if I had
Yeah.
like a 10K service, I'd be more than happy to jump on an hour and just explain what we do, and then try to give a lot of value, because at the end of the day I know like
Yeah.
it's going to be 10K a month, so I just need to close
Cool.
one or two, right?
No, that makes sense. But as you're listening, keep in mind garbage in, garbage out.
So
There's
true.
no way around it. It applies to any one of these price points. So I don't. I know that's a common belief. Like, hey, it's just $10, man. I need to get some names and emails, right? But if we can leave that thinking aside, now how does that like? What's the right setup for this
Okay.
$9 a month product in terms of people, and then we'll get into strategy. We may be doing this backwards, by the way.
Instead of people, yeah,
You know,
it could be we're kind of like trying to figure out what angle should we actually tackle. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
I
yeah.
got a list of points. Maybe we could just go through all those points and then see
Let's
what you
do it.
have as well. So one of the other
Yeah,
thing I was thinking is the low price point. You're gonna have to change your strategy to what is the end result for you. So it could be, for example, you're going to favor, hey guys, can you actually go there and then give us some help with filling a survey, for example. Or it could be, just reply yes if you're interested, and I'll send you more information, or those sort of thing. Where the higher price point, you're gonna want to do maybe a uh, higher effort. Like it could be like, hey, I just built this video just for you. Yeah, you can go and watch it. And that took me like maybe 20 minutes to do the video. Or I tell them like, hey, it took me 20 minutes to do this video, but it's really for you just specifically. I highlight this and this and this. And I think all those sort of research you can do. I don't think you're going to spend that much time on the $9. And then therefore you're going to have to go for a much narrower vertical, like having like razor edge definition of what your target
yes,
is, where you can be
yes.
a bit more horizontal when you have like more resources, more price. Like, oh, we're going to go at 3 vertical at the same time, and it's okay. We'll
Think
see which one works.
agencies, right?
Yeah,
Marketing agencies. Yeah.
exactly.
In fact, that's super common in my eyes. responsible sending, where you're not going to put all your eggs in one basket. If you're an agency that can service 5 different industries, try a fintech campaign, try a credit union campaign, try an infotech campaign, and one of those is going to outperform the other. But just to be clear, that $9 a month service, you have to be extremely defined, or you will lose the power to convert people without a lot of hand holding. Is that right?
I agree. In fact, one of the strategy that I would probably recommend people going for the $9 is to look at more for VIPs. So instead of like contacting directly
Mm,
businesses, unless, you know, we keep on like saying for the $9, like, you know, not necessarily in derogatory, how do you say, like,
derogatory.
yeah, exactly. It's
Um,
not in that sense, because it could well be that those $9 is actually on a per user and you're contacting companies that have like 10,000 users, right?
yeah,
But then in this case,
right.
you'll be in the more than a 10K a month category, right? We're really talking about like, I'm talking like, you know, to individual founders for like a small widget tool that I have for, you know, my Trello, whatever you have,
Yeah,
right? So you're really talking about
yeah,
$9 a month. And so therefore, I would say one of the strategy that will be more successful is that try to increase the deal value of your emails, so that instead of going to just one person and the end user, maybe go to a reseller, like, you know, go to a reseller and ask them like, hey, would you feel, you know, happy to recommend that? Go for the influencers, go for,
yeah,
I will sort of like change my strategy, not necessarily going for the
yeah,
end one, but seeing who can actually aggregate more of my end
yeah.
user
So
customers.
it's kind of like this branch here, where you could go after the end users,
Yeah.
or you could go after the people that have access to your end users, or you can climb one more level. And this is a story you've mentioned before, on the cast, where
Did I?
you can go to the highest level. I'm thinking of an example where a program that helped game developers went to universities and said, we're going to give your
Oh,
students
3ds
access
Max.
to
Mhm.
this tool. There you go. You want to finish the story?
No, no, go. I think it's great,
Yeah.
the way you say it. Yeah.
We're going to give your students free access to the tool as long as you're in the university, and the tool is quite robust. It's going to be the next wave of development. They get it for free. Here you go. And then that sort of seeded the marketplace. When those new graduates found a job,
Yeah, they were
well, they
already.
said, hey, boss man, you got to buy this thing. I'm good with it. It's great. And that's how they found,
Yeah.
we might call that like a
They
VIP
created their own
square.
market,
Yeah.
right? In that sense, I think it's
Yeah.
again probably like a different use case. It's probably not going to happen with your like productivity widgets at $9 a month kind of thing. Um,
Right.
but
Right.
I can see that like effectively, if you go to university and then you buy like suddenly 100 licenses because they got like 100 people, then obviously this is your
Yeah,
VIP in that sense automatically, right?
exactly.
The
So, but
next stage
let's
will
let's get a little
effectively
bit more.
sell it to Apple employees, and then they actually know they will rip it off and then use it in their own iOS system. So don't do
Probably.
that.
But here, let's get like a little bit more granular. Let's say we've got the VIP concept. We know how to
Right.
find people that have access. These are um, folks that are influencers in the space, and I use that term very broadly.
Yeah,
But
sure.
if imagine you can contact someone on YouTube who has an audience of 100,000,
Hmm.
very good
Yeah,
candidates. You could
awesome.
send 10 cold emails, make a few partnerships, and make a lot of money with that $9 a month thing. Now, maybe not more practically speaking, but another way you can skin this cat is coming up with a sequence at direct users that scratches an itch that the marketplace has. That's probably the most important thing. It won't work if you're putting something out that's not really helpful. Imagine you went to Zookeepers and you said, hey, I have this new panda nostril ointment. It cures everything. If those vets don't actually have pandas, it ain't going to work. So
That's
keep
true.
in mind, you need something that's going to work. But you could say, hey, I want to set up company with, um, uh, access to this tool for a couple months on the house. Am I send it to the right person? It's really easy. And it solves X in X
Yeah.
minutes or X hours. And that could actually work. I know last cast, Jeremy, I think we were talking about how hard it is to come up with a self-service cold outreach campaign where you send an email, someone
Yes, it's
clicks,
true.
but it happens, right?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Happens. So this would be a nice place to insert that working self-service checkout on a cold email. I think there's this works for 1% of the market, but if you have a product that solves a bleeding neck problem, then you'll be able to work with this. Especially, you're going to give them a trial, right? And you just kind of grease that
Yeah, it's a
slide so
sort of
that,
like land and
yeah,
expand as well. And another thing I was thinking is, well, when you have the price of your product will also probably influence who your target people are going to be at the company. So for example, if I'm selling something for $9 a month, I'm not going to bother the CEO with that $9 a month thing, unless I perceive the CEO as a VIP, we will then, put it into his own. But if
right.
I sell something that is specifically only used by someone, it's probably not going to be the CEO, because $9 a month is probably not worth it. But if you go at the 10K a month, like the opposite is also true. Like the sort of end employee at the lower level of the hierarchy, that it doesn't have the
Yeah,
power to just say like, yeah, sure, I'll buy your stuff for 10K, on behalf of the
yeah,
company. That's not going to happen.
right.
So it will influence who in the company you're going. A typical example would be if you have like an improvement for developer tool, right? And then you contact a company of, let's say, 10 people. You're not going to you can contact the developer, and then you can contact the 10 developers and say, hey, or even like the CEO. So you got some sort of like broad luxury as to who you contact. But when you go for the 10K, you're not going to contact the developer. You have to go up the chain to someone who can sign up or has the power, at least I will believe, right? Otherwise, it's a
Now,
super long sales cycle.
yeah, and just keep in mind here, let's say this was a $10,000 a month development thing. Maybe it's, yeah, sure. Let's just work
Yeah,
with
a
that.
performance improvement tool. There is some stuff like that cost a lot.
You
Yeah.
could go after the CTO. That would probably be a wise choice. But also, you could go after the CFO if this happens to save the company risk or a lot of time and output of resources. So um,
Mm,
I'm glad we had a discussion on who to target as part of the
exactly,
strategy.
because
It does
Jack,
make
some people will say, yeah, but you could go to the developer, and the developer will say, I want this super useful tool. And so it's like, yeah, but do you want your developer to be your sales force? It never quite works
yeah,
very well. So you have to sort
right.
of like go higher,
It's
right?
harder. It's harder because you need to win the developer over, which I think is very difficult. And then you need to, well,
I mean, if you
if
have
you
something
have
for
something
developer that is great, they will want it. But the problem is they
that
won't
won't
be
make
able to
them look
sell
bad.
it to their
You see
organization.
what I'm saying? Like, hey, boss, we have to buy this thing. It's like, wait, I hired you for that. Why don't you just, can't you do it
Oh,
without?
no,
You
no,
know what I
no.
mean?
It's more
There's
like, no, no,
no
it's more like a hammer.
competition.
Like if you want me
Yeah,
to, do this thing, I need a hammer, right? And that hammer costs a
yeah,
lot. And
yeah,
performance tools are exactly in these categories, or like super like simulator, those sort of things
yeah,
cost a fortune. And
right.
but would you expect the developer to make a use case, a sales case for your product, unless you actually have a lot of materials, which you could potentially do?
Mhm.
It's going to be a hard sell because developers are really poor at selling, really honestly. But who
Yeah.
knows? You should try.
Um,
But you got the
and
luxury of
the,
trying.
I will say the developers that are good at selling aren't developers very long. They end up being the founders of something else, right?
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. Do your dance. Do your dance. Okay, so let's move on here. I think we covered the low price point pretty well.
Mhm.
The short of it is think about VIPs. Consider selling it straight to the end user if you can manage to put together a self-service email to trial thing. Worry about your conversion rate with your UX person and your product manager, but that's that's kind of it, right? Think about who you're going to bring this to. More or less summary. Okay, so let's take it up a notch. Now you're selling something $500 a month. What changes? I think for starters, the lower in the chain user may not be able to sign off on something like that. It might not be oh yeah, this price point is nothing. I'm definitely going to be the decision maker there. Now you start to get approval up top. So I think your targeting changes.
Um, I see the middle tier as a combination of two that will depend on your product as well. So it's like you have some forces, and you're gonna have to make some choice on this. Like, do we hire a second person to do just purely the targeting, or do we, spend more time with qualifying calls. You're going to have like to sort of like pick and choose where that works for you. And I think it depends, like you mentioned, like who you're going to target. Are you going to talk to CFOs? Are you going to talk to end users? Is 250 still
Right.
okay for the manager of the team? I
Yeah.
think when we come in the middle, it's going to be a lot of combination of those two extreme, one way or another, right?
Yeah,
And
so what I've
that's
seen
how I
is
see that.
there's usually an account executive or several account executives that are going to take the sales calls and manage the clients.
Yeah,
And then there are the SDRs that are going to do the hard work of
that's right.
getting those
Yeah,
sales calls organized at this level. I'm oversimplifying, but that's
sure, sure.
typically it at this price point. You don't have the founder of the company meeting with prospects at this price point. We
Right.
might see something different with the next tier, but now who would, if you're in agreement with that setup, Jeremy, who would
Yeah.
receive this message? And maybe we can talk about the kind of strategy that we'd be working in here. So at
Um,
this level,
yeah, tell us.
you a call is appropriate. You can take a
Yes.
call. You can
Mhm.
take a few calls and still make some money, right?
Your CTA
Um,
will be different as well, of course. Like I
you're
mentioned,
what?
your CTA, your call to action will be
Yeah,
different. You'll be much more willing to jump on a call and then, and then just
exactly.
this is your qualifying call. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's probably going to be the mid-level pricing, outbound strategies. Let's
Yeah.
get cold prospects on the phone.
And then one thing we didn't talk about, like when you have the 10K or even the mid tier, I think that's when personalization really starts shining. And then the personalization can be wild at the 10K because you get more time to do some research on that person, figuring out what they like,
Videos.
videos like we
Yeah.
discussed and so on. Well, the now in the now, you're going to have to do the personalization through segmenting, right? We want all those companies that have X number of people who do exactly that like whatever. So you're going to do, and that will be your target, your group, right? Your target. You can still do that at the higher deals, but I think it's a competitive game, and so therefore people will put more money into their research, and they will have a better chance
Yeah.
of reaching.
So what I'm hearing is, um, if you happen to be a $9 product without a defined niche, good luck. That's a
That's
really
right.
hard sell.
It's really hard.
Yeah. Um, yeah.
So
That's
true.
where you need to have incredible copywriting. You need to have a thing that solves a real problem in a new way, or else it's going to be very challenging to get
At least
outbound
with
to
cold
work.
outreach, right? It could really be actually working extremely well with just inbound based on, I don't know, FOMO or whatever, like trends, something that comes. I think you can do very, very well with a $9 product, but we're only purely talking about like
Sure.
outbound, right?
Yeah, and so I'll just make this statement: if you have a low price point, around $9 per month per user, and you haven't defined a niche that you can reach using outbound, I wouldn't use outbound. I would go
But
elsewhere. I think
here's
it's
where you
yeah.
and I will differ on this one. I would
Let's
use
hear
it,
it.
but not with the end mind to actually make a profit. It will be purely from market research standpoint.
And okay,
And then I'll be happy to jump on a call and understand better the problem. So
sure.
it will be until I have a good market fit. I think that would be a great research tool, not sales tool in that sense. Well, although they're kind of
Yeah,
linked.
to line up sales calls. Yeah. Okay, can't argue with that. So in short, this middle tier, $500 a month, you want to have an account executive and maybe an SDR team
Yeah.
combination
Okay.
help reach out to more of the end decision maker, and your strategy will be get them on the phone, add lots of personalization at this stage because you cannot afford not to, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. And then take it from there.
I think the call will even be like demo calls right away, maybe trying to close them on a call because you can't afford like having 6 calls, right? It's not a super long sales cycle. But when you are the 10K, then there are two things for the 10K, honestly, because I could also see that it is like a course, one service for one super healthy
Maybe a
individual.
mastermind.
Exactly, the mastermind or coaching session for just the CEO, training session, whatever, like a day retreat for the team, whatever kind of thing. I think those can be sort of like shorter sales cycle, but we're really talking about like 10K a month, right? As in terms of like price point. And so
Yeah.
that way, usually we'll have like a bit longer sales cycle we're still not at the 100K, amounts where this is like Oracle trying to, get some, big piece of infrastructure for like another,
Right.
enterprise level.
Right.
But still the sales cycle will be longer. And so therefore you should prepare to have like different multiple calls at this price point or to convince, whether it's like, 1-2 sessions, see how it goes. And then after that, you start, charging.
Yep.
But at the 200, 500, I think you can definitely go ahead and then just say like, hey, right, if it works, maybe 2 calls maximum. And I think that should be good
Yep.
enough to, close the deal.
So some strategy, maybe it could be, yeah, let's call it tactic. Let's call
Okay,
it what it is.
let's close up with some tactics then.
Yeah. I've been a part, and well, let's just say I have been active and maybe currently active in a similar kind of approach to getting CEO types to pay around 10K a month for some sort of high-end consulting. Okay. Something that tends to work well is inviting that CEO to your next session. So in the outreach, you kind of say, hey, pain point, do you want to be my guest? We're going to be meeting with fellow, tell them what's, that people want to meet with their peers. They want to know that it's not just some guru trying to fake it. And instead they're getting some real, discussion with people that get them. That tends to work quite nice. Now, the thing to know is
it's perceived value in this case, right?
Yeah. And then you have to work the sales process after that call. You need to provide value in the call, and you need to follow up, because they're not going to hang up that call and give you the credit card. You're going to need to phone them, follow up, do all the things that a higher tier price point requires of the salesperson. Yeah.
Cool. So that makes sense. Do you think we covered like most of it, or do you still have any item? I think I'm good on my end. I think we covered pretty good. Do you have any other things?
Yeah, we could spend a moment talking about personalization or preparing the send. So at the 10K a month, you can afford a phone
Lots
step.
of things.
You can have just a person who's going to follow up whenever somebody. Do you remember we have a friend that we met in one of our first trips to Japan, right?
Oh yeah.
And he was doing hardware sales like around this price point. He would call everybody that opened an email. And that's a luxury that you can afford at this, not the $9 a month, right? So I would add phone steps. I would play around with personalized videos. Definitely have lots of personalization in the copy, talking about why they would be a good fit for this, and use multi-channel things that are harder to replicate.
Definitely, multi-channel is a good thing as well that you can supplement your outreach with.
Yep. And why not? At the end of the day, if it's a more valuable client, you're going to have fewer of them, probably, than others. So you've got to make the most of it, most of each one, because there's a finite number of people that are going to pay that amount that you're selling. So yeah, don't let any of them slide through the cracks.
All right, cool. Hopefully we did a good job at highlighting some of the main big differences of cold outreach at different price points. My hope is that it makes you think a little bit about some of the things that you can potentially try to experiment or revisit. If you were doing like super high touch at $9 a month, maybe you may want to switch gears a little bit, instead of saying like, this cold email stuff doesn't work. And one thing that I also want to encourage the higher price point is like, sometimes they become very comfortable in outbound, but there are some really good return on investment sometime on the higher end as well with cold outreach. So it's like I talked with one who said like, yeah, it really never really worked with us. And then I highlighted like 2 or 3 questions, and it was like, yeah, maybe we should try it again. It's just like, so there are potentially, some still some room for that, but course maybe.
Yeah, and well said. If you are still listening, watching, and you said, Yeah, that was helpful. Then you're going to love the course that Jeremy and I put together over at course.quickmail.io. It's this conversation on steroids. It's far more actionable and a complete soup to nuts. Here's how you send cold emails profitably these days. Here's how you list build. Here's how you do copywriting research. Here's how you write the emails, add personalization. And you can watch us as we're creating emails, adding personalization, researching people on LinkedIn and figuring out what to say in order to get them to reply, and also how to handle replies and work on automating and outsourcing all the hard stuff so that you can spend more time on the phones and less time prospecting. So course.quickmail.io is definitely worth a quick check. You can try it out for 4 weeks, absolutely risk-free. So why would you not? Course.quickmail.io. I'll see you there. Thanks, Jeremy.
All right. Thanks, Jack. Awesome cast.